Hello, everybody. So let's talk about security guarantees and alliance configurations for a moment, because there's an awful lot of misunderstanding out there about what they are, how they work, and what is and isn't possible when it comes to security arrangements. In fact, and this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but my whole area of research, neutrality and neutral states, are one part of what you can call security guarantee structures. Everyone watching this channel occasionally knows that the West's refusal to live with a neutral Ukraine that economically integrated into both Russia and the EU lies at the heart of the current warfare in Europe. Unsurprisingly, the Europeans have also made their entire military thinking on the conflict about security guarantees for Ukraine. You hear that over and over and over. What about the security guarantees? What about the security guarantees? I will show you why this European discussion, on the one hand, is incredibly stupid, and on the other hand, it's also, and to add insult to injury, it's also conducted in one of the dumbest ways imaginable, much of it rooted actually in simple ignorance about how security arrangements work. As usual, the problem boils down to dumb people being unable to reason outside the confines of binary choices. But especially security arrangements are anything but binary. So let's start with a look at a map and just a short appreciation of how dumb it is to focus on security and guarantees in the first place. Look, so this is a map of NATO, right? As it stands today with Finland and with Sweden and Finland integrated into it. And those are the 27 odd countries that are covered by what the majority of pundits out there calls a security guarantee, right? But I already talked about this in a video last time, that the security guarantee, the famous NATO Article 5, is not even a strong security guarantee. If you read this article, the article clearly says that member states, when one of them is attacked, members will consider this to be an attack against all of them. And if that happens, then individually and in concert with other parties, actions can be taken that each country, each member country deems necessary. Actions that it deems necessary, including but not exclusively, including the use of armed force. Each member state, once another member state is attacked under the NATO treaty, is still free to decide whether it's going to use military force itself or not. This just to drive home the point that even though if you're a NATO member country, if you get attacked, all other countries are within the treaty still able to say, like, we will send you weapons, we will try to support you as much as we can, but we will not go to war for you. That's still okay under the NATO treaty. So if you think of this Article 5 as a hard security guarantee, then I am very sorry to tell you it is not. Of course, the political cost for members not to come to the military help of one of the other members would be huge. And the expectation is that members will go to war. But the treaty doesn't actually require states to do so. It's an option, it's not a must, right? And if we just look for 1 second at the map of the world, you also realize that the NATO territory is not even that huge, right? And when we look at other places in the world that have security treaties or security guarantees, the way that Europeans currently think that the only possible thing for Ukraine is to have security guarantees. There's only a few other places that are covered with hard security guarantees. Japan is one. Japan has a security treaty with the United States, which requires the US to extend its military apparatus to Japan in exchange for Japan giving military bases. That's the currently valid deal, treaty, 1960 security treaty that they have, and the US is under a hard commitment to defend the Japanese islands. We have another hard security agreement between China and North Korea. They have a still valid security agreement from the 1950s, which says an attack against one is an attack against the other, and you have to help each other if that happens. But apart from that, large parts of the world are not covered by any kind of security agreements. And this is where the whole discussion about what are the security arrangements for Ukraine are so incredibly dumb. Somebody explain to me how it is that Mongolia is safe without security guarantees, right? Mongolia is sandwiched between China and Russia, and neither of them attacked Mongolia since its independence, like as in excuse me, after 1945. After the current arrangement came into being, and Mongolia declared its independence somewhere around 1911, and this had its up and downs. But Mongolia never had hard security agreements with anyone else, never had security guarantees, and Mongolia was not attacked. Mongolia currently isn't attacked. Kazakhstan. Russia doesn't invade Kazakhstan. Russia is not invading Uzbekistan. Russia is not invading Turkmenistan. Russia isn't invading anyone, and nobody is worried. Turkmenistan is not worried about being invaded by Russia. Turkmenistan officially declared its neutrality, and its neutrality is working beautifully for Turkmenistan. How is it that the Europeans keep thinking that the only thing that can keep Ukraine safe are hard security guarantees, when we have so many examples? Look at all of the African states that are not in any kind of security arrangement. Look at all the South American states that are not in security arrangements. How is it that so many places on Earth do not have hard security guarantees and they are safe, while the only place on Earth that is currently in a war is in a war because European powers wanted to ram down the idea of NATO membership, of having a security guarantee down the throat of Russia, and over that now you've got an entire war going on. So the safest way to exist in international relations is if you don't have enemies. If you don't have enemies and nobody wants to attack you, you are safe and you won't be attacked. So the question is not what kind of security guarantees, who can promise you security? The question is, how do you make sure nobody wants to attack you? And in international relations, often you talk about deterrence, right? You want to deter others from attacking you. Well, the alternative is to have good friendships, right? You don't need deterrence if you are surrounded only by countries who want to do business with you, just like Mongolia is doing business with both Russia and China, just as Kazakhstan is doing business with Russia and China, just as most of the world is doing business with everybody. The only ones who get hung up and think that the only thing that keeps other states from your throat is hard security alliances are the Euro-Americans. Why is Mexico safe without security agreements? Well, because Mexico makes sure that it itself doesn't pose a threat to the United States, right? So, and this is the core of the stupidity of the current discourse, when you should focus on how to create the conditions for friendly relations. You single-mindedly focus on this idea of security arrangements, and this is the point where I really need to talk to you about the different levels of alliance making that we've got, because this is an old problem, right, or an old issue, and we have at least four different ways in which alliances can be formed, and we have like historical examples for those. The first and most aggressive form of an alliance is an offensive alliance, when states make treaties with each other in order to attack another one. So the promise would then be to go and attack a third state. An example of that would be the secret annex to the Non-Aggression Pact between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany in 1938. 1939, to jointly attack Poland and basically divide Poland between the two, right? This is a pact and an agreement to dismantle a third state, an offensive alliance. Then we have defensive alliances, of which currently, of course, NATO is the NATO treaty. The NATO treaty is the most obvious example of that. An attack against one is an attack against all, and you then you defend together. Although, as I just showed you, the NATO treaty itself leaves it open whether this joint defense happens militarily or with other with other means. We've had other treaties in world history. Most importantly, we've had the Covenant of the League of Nations. The League of Nations, of course, having been the precursor to the current United Nations. The League was formed in 1919 after the First World War, and the League had a strong security clause, I think it was Article 16, in there that said if one state is attacked, then the other members must use military force to repel the attack against the member. So that was a stronger version, actually, the League of Nations, Article 16, compared to Article 5 of the NATO Charter. Then the next level, one step down, is passive non-assistance agreements. This has also in the history been called the Neutrality Pact. The promise here is that if you create such a passive non-assistance agreement, you promise that you, as one of the parties of this agreement, you will not join the fight against the other party. So this is something that at the moment that basically the Russia and North Korea, and also Russia and Iran concluded. It's also what was concluded between Japan and the Soviet Union in the Second World War. It's the promise that you won't join another alliance, or another state and jointly attack the other party. Now, this is different from the last stage, the last kind of alliance making that you have, which is an active non-assistance pact, or also sometimes referred as a non-aggression pact, in which you actually promise that you won't help other states against in an attack against them. Now, the difference between these two is that in a neutrality pact, you just promise not to join the fighting against the other party, but you might still send weapons and supplies to another party fighting, to a third state fighting against your contract partner. In a non-aggression pact, an active non-assistance pact, you promise that you also won't do that. You won't send any kind of supplies to a third state that still is fighting, that is fighting the other partner. In the Second World War, we had such a situation. The Soviet Union, in fact, Japan wanted a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. It wanted the Soviet Union's promise that it wouldn't support a third state against it. But the Soviet Union wasn't willing to do that because they wanted to help the Chinese, Chiang Kai-shek, to fight the Japanese. So they wanted to continue sending weapons to Chiang Kai-shek. So, hence, they said, like, no, we are not giving you a non-assist. We are not giving you a neutrality pact. We're not giving you a non-aggression pact. We're only giving you a neutrality pact. So that's those are the historical examples. And all of these pacts are possible, and all of these pacts are just a matter of what states want to do. Again, under international law, none of these pacts, except now for offensive alliances. Offensive alliances are under United Nations Charter not allowed anymore. But apart from that, you're free to create any such kind of pacts. And this is really where I would like to point out that when we talk about security for Ukraine and neutrality for Ukraine, one of the greatest misunderstandings is that if Ukraine decided to be neutral, that there couldn't be any kind of security arrangement for it. And although I just said that it is stupid to only think in terms of security promises, I would like to point out that there are many different configurations possible, even with a neutral Ukraine. Neutral states can have security guarantees by third states. This might sound counterintuitive, but let me repeat it. Neutral countries can have security guarantees by third states, and it is not a breach of neutrality. Let me show you how that is possible by looking at what happened in 1870 to Belgium. Belgium was neutralized in 1839, declared neutral in 1839, and Belgium maintained its neutrality all the way to the First World War when it was attacked then by Germany in 1914. But during the longest part, the better part of the 19th century, Belgium was a successful neutral state. Now, there was a crisis, and a big crisis in Europe in 1870 that involved neutral Belgium, and it was the Franco-Prussian War. That war in which, at the end in 1871, the Germans took away Alsace-Lorraine from the French, right? So here's a map of Europe in 1871, right? This is what the whole catastrophe used to look like. We still had the United Kingdom that included Ireland. We had a German Empire that went all the way to there was, of course, the Prussian Empire, right, that went all the way to the east. We had a huge Austria-Hungary, and the Germans and the French, they were at each other's throats on and off. And in 1870, it really boiled up. And one of the dangers was that either Germany or France would use neutral Belgium, would cross neutral Belgium to attack the other one. That was a very real threat in 1870. And Belgium, being neutral, of course, was just sitting there and could have been a potential victim of an attack. And then what the Brits did, what the UK did in this situation, is that it created, in fact, two separate security treaties. One, let me show you this one. It was created on August 9th, 1870, between Her Majesty, the British Crown, right? Her Majesty and the King of Prussia, relative to the independence and neutrality of Belgium. That's the title of the treaty. But it's a treaty between the UK and Prussia. And Article 1, just look at this, the important part here says that considering that Belgium is neutral and Belgium is important, this neutral buffer state is important for the security of Prussia. Her Majesty, the Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, on her part, declares that if during hostilities between the French and the Germans, the armies of France should violate the neutrality of Belgium, she will be prepared to cooperate with His Prussian Majesty for the defense of Belgium. Employing for that purposes her naval and military forces. So Britain makes an arrangement with Germany, with Prussian Germany, that if the French should try to cross Belgium, should attack Belgium, then Britain will join Germany in defending Belgium against the French. And now look what they did on the very next day, or 2 days later, sorry, on August 11, 1870. They created a literal copy-paste of the entire treaty, this time between Her Majesty and the Emperor of France. That if during hostilities the armies of the North German Confederation and its allies should violate the neutrality of Belgium, she will be prepared to cooperate with His Imperial Majesty for the defense of Belgium, employing for the purpose her naval and military forces. So here you go. Here we have a example of how a neutral state was given a security guarantee by third state without being itself party to that treaty, right? Thereby, Belgian neutrality was not in any way or shape or form influenced, right? Belgium didn't breach its neutrality. Belgium is not an alliance member. It's the other states that create an alliance around it, and actually a double lock in this example here, in which then in the end the UK had an agreement with France to defend Belgium against the Germans should they attack, and the UK also had an agreement with Germany to defend Belgium against the French should they attack. So Belgium ended up in outside, but the beneficiary of a double security agreement, right? And this is the level to which it is possible to create security arrangements. Now, and you must know that in 1914, when finally the Germans did attack Belgium in order to attack France, that was the main reason the British the Brits declared war on Germany was because they said legally we still have a treaty that is in effect, right, with the French. So this treaty was the main legal argument used in 1914 for the Brits to join the First World War on the side of the French. So don't get me wrong. I mean, these security agreements can be very dangerous and tricky, and they can lead to cascading effects, especially once you have a network of these treaties in place. But this is an example for how a neutral state can be the beneficiary of a security agreement. So in theory, you could think about something like the United States and Russia, both of them promising other states to come to the rescue of Ukraine should Ukraine be attacked by any kind of third state, without actually Ukraine being party to such an agreement, and thereby having still a neutral rest Ukraine, if that ever comes to be true or would be the case, and that would not be a breach of Ukrainian neutrality. Again, international relations is extremely free, and international law allows for a lot of different configurations of what kind of treaties can and cannot be made, and the states who are subject to certain security arrangements do not necessarily need to be part of those arrangements. They can be left out. And is that nice? No, it's not. It's great power politics. But such arrangements can create the stability needed in order to prevent war because in 1870 and 1871, the Franco-Prussian War didn't become a general European war. It was contained. It remained a war between Prussia and France, and it only became later in 1914. Old animosities became a world war once also these treaties started interlocking, and a lot of very bad political processes started happening at the same time. But you see what I mean? Talking about talking about how Ukraine needs to get security guarantees by one or other state, and without that you cannot live, you can never be secure, is stupid in the first place. There's a lot of states in the world that do not have any kind of security arrangements, and they are secure. They're not being attacked. They're currently living happily and in great prosperity. Just think about like tiny little Liechtenstein and how Liechtenstein is not being attacked either by Switzerland or Austria. Think about Luxembourg, think about Singapore, think about Indonesia, think about Malaysia, think about all of the states that do not have security arrangements and security guarantees and are still safe. And on the other hand, it's also a stupid argument, because there's so many ways in which security arrangements can be formed, if that is the only way that these people can think about it. So, but you could have a neutral Ukraine, and you could still have some forms of security arrangements. The best arrangements, of course, again, being those that are made with all with all concerned powers, and have shared security, and make sure that the security of one state isn't going to diminish the security of another. And also great powers, with like Russia and the United States, they are the most infamous for being very insecure and feeling threatened by even by very minor problems on their borders. But that's what it is. So what is needed, in fact, is a common security arrangement, a big one, the way that security was thought in the 1970s, when the Conference for Security and Cooperation in Europe, that big conference, was held and ended in the 1975 Helsinki Final Act. Those are the moments when all states were able to come together and agree on some minimal arrangements. We need this again in Europe, and we need it fast in order to prevent the continent from again going at each other's throat. Thank you for listening today.